Joining us, MS Now senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig, MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, and MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. Priya, what does maxed out mean?
That's a great question, Katie. And I think that really what it highlights is that this is all at the discretion of the president himself. We know that he was given this jet back in May, and the Air Force attempted to modify it beginning in August. They said that they were going to have it ready by this summer. That was a matter of 10 or 11 months. But this administration has repeatedly said that no shortcuts were taken and that this plane was safe and secure. So really, this is a stunning 180 to see the president first get off of this Qatari-gifted Air Force One in Turkey when he was at the NATO summit and instead revert back to the old Air Force One and now to pull it out of service entirely. But I think the question begs, what can actually be done in a matter of 1 month? We know, as the reporter there pointed out, that this plane doesn't have an anti-missile defense system on it. We also know that it doesn't have the electromagnetic pulse hardening that it would need to make that aircraft safe and secure during a potential nuclear threat. And we also know that it probably doesn't have the same kind of command and control functionality that turns that aircraft into a flying White House Situation Room that would allow the president to receive classified intelligence briefings or securely communicate with military officers around the world and authorize things like airstrikes in Iran, which is what we're seeing occur right now. So most of the sources that I've been talking to say that none of those things are really going to be able to happen in a matter of a month. If you look at the two other Air Force Ones that we're waiting for, they were essentially, it was announced that we were going to get two more Air Force Ones back in 2015. A defense contracting company received that contract in 2018. It was scheduled to be completed in 2024. And it is 2026. Those two Air Force Ones are still not done. It's scheduled to arrive in 2028. So typically, Katie, these things take years and billions of dollars, not a matter of months.
That's a very good point you just made, Priya. And it's a bit galling, Carol, to think that the president flew to Turkey on a plane that does not have those things. And it appears today that he admitted as much. And it's, even more galling when you think the White House called you a liar for reporting it.
Well, we try not to get too galled over here. There's a lot of reporting to do, and we just try to focus on the work. But I'm glad for the questions, Katie, because as Priya and I reported on that day when the president decided that, or rather the president was asked to get on his old jet that he had rejected as not fancy enough and not good enough for him. On that same day, we reported that he was embarrassed, right, to have to make this shift, and embarrassed that the plane he received as this great gift and said it would be stupid not to accept it from a foreign government, that he had to basically acknowledge with his own feet he had to move off of it in order to safely command a war and a series of strikes, in order to safely be in the region where hostilities were then re-arising on that day. I think our reporting has stood the test of time, as we said it would on that day and days following. And I would also add to Priya's excellent reporting on this about what's possible. The president's not really reliable as a narrator for what exactly is happening to the plane. All we know is embarrassment and pride are fueling a lot of his comments to date on this, and we can't be sure what will happen in a few months. We can't be sure whether this plane can be trusted. What we know is he wanted to show it off, starting with his July 1st to July 4th festivities. He flew it to North Dakota. He flew it, obviously, to Turkey. And I'm sure he had national security experts questioning whether that was a great idea. And it became untenable when, obviously, he ended the ceasefire on that same day while he was in Turkey.
Yeah, somebody got to him and said this is really irresponsible and got him to admit it was so with his feet, as you just said. And talking about the timeline, he says a month. Again, we'll see if it's a month. But Priya, you made the really good point that even the ones that have been in production now are at least 2 years delayed, probably more. So the president has a year and a half left on his, about a year and a half left on his term. Anyone there questioning whether it's worth spending all this money to retrofit this plane when he's apparently going to be taking it with him when he leaves?
Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't seem to be something that is concerning him. Not only have there been several questions raised over the past year about security concerns regarding this plane, but also ethical concerns about whether or not we should be accepting a gift from a foreign country that the president will be using as his Air Force One. We know that Qatar has had relationships with designated terrorist organizations around the world that the United States has deemed as terrorist organizations, and they're playing a key role, by the way, in the negotiations that are happening between Iran and the United States, or not happening for that matter, over Iran's nuclear program. So I think several people have raised concerns about whether there is a point to all of this. But as Carol mentioned, this is really a point of pride. And I should also say that I did call my sources inside of the Pentagon who would be responsible for standing up this plane. And I tried to ask a lot of questions about what is possible over the next month. And they refused to elaborate on what exactly is happening here. One thing I do know from covering this administration now for a long time is that oftentimes the people who are responsible or tasked with doing something don't often know that they're doing it until they see the president make the announcement on television that they're going to be doing it. So I think there's a lot of questions right now swirling around inside of the Pentagon and probably at the White House, too, about exactly what it's going to take to max out this airplane.